Picture this. A man walks out of the most secure prison in Indiana with nothing but a carved piece of wood in his pocket. His face is pinned to every police bulletin board in the country. Hundreds of agents are hunting him. And yet, he just walks out. Clean, free, untouchable. In a single year, he will rob 24 banks. He will break out of jail twice. He will make the most powerful law enforcement agency in America look like a joke. And when they finally catch up to him, it will happen outside a movie theater on a warm summer night, in the most cinematic ending any outlaw ever got. His name is John Dillinger, and for one blazing, brutal, unforgettable year, he owned America. How does a farm boy from Indiana become the most wanted man in the United States? How does a petty thief become a legend so dangerous that the government has to invent an entirely new kind of war just to bring him down? That's exactly what we're about to find out. And if you're into stories like this, criminals, outlaws, people who rewrote the rules of the world they lived in, subscribe right now. Every week, we go deep into the lives of the most extraordinary figures in the history of crime. You won't want to miss what's coming. June 1903. Indianapolis, Indiana, a city that hums with the particular energy of the early American century. Streetcars, factory smoke, the smell of horse and gasoline mixing in the summer heat. It is here that John Herbert Dillinger is born, in a working-class neighborhood where ambition is common and opportunity is not. His father, John Wilson Dillinger, runs a small grocery store. He is a stern man, religious, hard-working, the kind of man who believes that discipline is the highest form of love. John's mother, Molly, dies when the boy is just 3 years old. That loss, early, wordless, impossible to process for a child that young, will cast a shadow over everything that follows. The family eventually moves to Mooresville, a small town in the Indiana countryside, where his father remarries and tries to build a quieter life. The new stepmother is kind enough, and the household is not cruel to young John. But something is already shifting in the boy. Neighbors notice it. Teachers notice it. There is a restlessness in him that ordinary life cannot seem to contain. He is smart, genuinely, sharply smart. But school bores him. Rules bore him. The idea that life in Mooresville is the only life available to him bores him most of all. By the time he is a teenager, John Dillinger is already running with a local group they call the Dirty Dozen. They are not killers. They are not even particularly dangerous. They steal small things, fight, race cars, and generally make themselves a nuisance to the respectable citizens of the town. His father, watching his son drift further from the straight path, hopes that distance from bad influences will set John straight. It doesn't work. It never works that way. At 17, Dillinger enlists in the United States Navy. For a young man hungry for movement and excitement, the military seems like it might be the answer. A structured channel for all that restless energy. It is not. He finds the discipline suffocating. The hierarchy frustrates him. Within months, he goes AWOL, deserts his post, and comes home to Indiana. The Navy discharges him as undesirable. It is the first official document in a long file that will eventually fill entire rooms at the FBI. Back in Indiana, he meets a girl named Beryl Hovius. He is 19. She is 16. They fall quickly and passionately into each other's lives, and in April of 1924, they get married. For a brief moment, it looks like John Dillinger might actually settle down. He works odd jobs. He tries to be a husband. He tries to fit the shape of the life that is expected of him. But the money is never enough. The jobs are grinding and dull. And in the summer of 1924, Dillinger makes the decision that will define the rest of his short life. He teams up with a local man named Edgar Singleton, an ex-convict 10 years his senior. Singleton has done time. He knows how these things work, or at least he thinks he does. Together, they decide to rob a local grocer named Frank Morgan. The plan is simple to the point of being stupid. They approach Morgan on his way home from church on a Sunday night. Dillinger hits him over the head with a bolt wrapped in cloth. The whole thing goes sideways almost immediately. Morgan fights back. Dillinger panics, pulls a gun, and fires, not killing Morgan, but injuring him badly enough to send the whole situation spiraling out of control. They are caught almost immediately. What happens next shapes everything. Singleton hires a lawyer. He pleads not guilty, goes to trial, and receives a relatively light sentence. Dillinger, on the advice of his father, who genuinely believes that honesty and cooperation will be rewarded, pleads guilty without a lawyer and throws himself on the mercy of the court. The judge shows him none. John Dillinger is sentenced to 10 to 20 years in the Indiana State Reformatory at Pendleton. He is 21 years old, and he is furious. That fury, cold, focused, and permanent, becomes the engine of everything that follows. In prison, Dillinger is a model of controlled resentment. He watches, he learns. He studies the men around him the way a student studies a textbook, absorbing everything they know about banks, about security systems, about police response times, about the mechanics of escape. The Indiana State Reformatory is, in the most literal sense, the school where John Dillinger gets his real education. Among his classmates are men who will become his crew: Homer Van Meter, John Hamilton, Charles Makeley, and Harry Pierpont. Pierpont in particular becomes a close friend and something of a mentor, older, more experienced, more methodical. Together, they form a study group of sorts, though the subject being studied is not anything that appears in a standard curriculum. They plan, they talk, they map out how it should be done, the right way, the professional way, and they make each other a promise. When the time comes, when they are out, they will do it together. The years inside change Dillinger in ways that go beyond simple criminal education. He enters Pendleton as a scared, angry kid who made a stupid mistake on a Sunday night. He exits, when he finally does exit, as something else entirely. A man who has spent years thinking about one thing and one thing only: what he is going to do when those gates open. In 1933, after serving nearly 9 years, John Dillinger is paroled. He walks out of prison into a country he barely recognizes. America in 1933 is broken. The stock market crash of 1929 has detonated like a bomb at the center of the national economy. Banks have failed by the thousands. Farms have been foreclosed. Factories have gone dark and silent. Unemployment stands at roughly 25% nationally, meaning 1 in 4 working Americans has no job, no income, and increasingly, no hope. In cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Indianapolis, the breadlines stretch for blocks. Men who had owned businesses, who had raised families in comfortable homes, who had believed absolutely in the American promise, those men are now sleeping in parks and begging for work that does not exist. The anger in the country is volcanic, and it is directed with specific and burning intensity at the banks. Banks have become the villains of the Depression narrative in a way that is almost too perfect. When farmers cannot make their payments, it is the bank that sends the men to take the land. When families lose their savings, it is because a bank somewhere made decisions that evaporated those savings like morning mist. The bank is the face of a system that has failed ordinary people catastrophically, and ordinary people are not in a forgiving mood. Into this landscape steps John Dillinger. He is 30 years old. He is lean and sharp-featured, with dark eyes that carry a kind of electric alertness, the look of a man who is always calculating something. He has a smile that photographs well, and a manner that people describe again and again as charming. Not charming in a slick or oily way, charming in the way of a man who is genuinely interested in the person in front of him, who makes you feel seen and considered. It is a gift, and he knows how to use it. Within weeks of his release, he begins robbing banks in Ohio and Indiana. The operations are small at first, quick hits on rural banks with minimal staff and minimal security. But even in these early jobs, a pattern emerges that will become his signature. Dillinger is not reckless. He scouts locations in advance. He times police response. He assigns roles to each member of his crew with a precision that speaks to all those hours of planning in a prison cell. And he has a rule, one he enforces consistently in these early days: no unnecessary violence. Get the money, get out, and nobody has to get hurt. It is a rule that makes him, paradoxically, popular. Stories begin to circulate. In one robbery, he helps a bank customer pick up the money they dropped during the commotion. In another, he is said to have apologized to a teller for the inconvenience. Whether these stories are entirely true barely matters. They are the stories people want to tell about him, and that desire says everything about the mood of the country. In an America where the banks are the enemy, the man robbing the banks is, for a significant portion of the population, something close to a hero. The newspapers understand this immediately. Depression-era America is hungry for stories, for characters, for anything that breaks the gray monotony of economic despair. And John Dillinger is the best story in the country. His name starts appearing in headlines with a frequency that editors learn to rely on. He is good copy. He is, in the language of the press, colorful. He is also, quietly, preparing for something much bigger. The promise he made in prison, to Pierpont, to Hamilton, to the others, he has not forgotten it. His early bank jobs are not just about money. They are about resources. He is building a war chest, funding what comes next. And what comes next is a jailbreak. His crew is still inside. Pierpont, Makeley, Hamilton, and the others are sitting in the Indiana State Prison at Michigan City, and Dillinger has not walked away from them. In the summer of 1933, he arranges for a package to be smuggled into Michigan City. Inside the package are 10 pistols, hidden beneath a shipment of thread intended for the prison shirt factory. On the 26th of September 1933, 10 prisoners use those guns to fight their way out of Michigan City. It is one of the most dramatic prison breaks in Indiana history. Guards are taken hostage, shots are fired, and Harry Pierpont, Homer Van Meter, Charles Makeley, and 7 others walk out into the Indiana night, free. John Dillinger is not there to see it, because on the very day his friends break out of Michigan City, Dillinger himself is sitting in a jail cell in Lima, Ohio, arrested on bank robbery charges just weeks after his own release from Pendleton. The timing is almost comic, except that it isn't, because what happens next is anything but funny. Pierpont does not forget his debts. On the night of the 12th of October, 1933, 3 men walk into the Allen County Jail in Lima, Ohio. They are dressed well. They carry themselves with the easy confidence of men who belong wherever they happen to be standing. They tell the sheriff on duty, Jess Sarber, that they are police officers from Indiana, come to question a prisoner named John Dillinger. Sarber is a reasonable man. He asks to see their credentials. Harry Pierpont shoots him once in the stomach. Sarber's wife Lucy is in the jail that night. She watches her husband fall. She screams. Pierpont and the others pistol whip her when she tries to reach the keys on her husband's belt. They take the keys themselves, find Dillinger's cell, and open the door. Jess Sarber dies of his wounds within hours. He is the first lawman to die in the orbit of John Dillinger. He will not be the last. And that death, cold, unnecessary, the killing of a small-town sheriff who simply asked to see a badge, is the moment the Dillinger story shifts in register. Whatever romantic gloss the newspapers have been applying begins to crack around the edges. The man who helps bank customers pick up their dropped money is connected, now, to the murder of a decent man doing an ordinary job on an ordinary night. But Dillinger is out, and the gang is together. What follows over the next several months is something that American law enforcement has genuinely never encountered before. The Dillinger gang, Pierpont, Hamilton, Van Meter, Makeley, and a rotating cast of others, operates with a speed and coordination that makes them almost impossible to catch using the tools available to local police forces. They hit a bank in Greencastle, Indiana, and take $28,000. They rob the First National Bank of East Chicago, Indiana. They move across state lines with fluid ease, and crossing a state line in 1933 means crossing the practical limit of any single police department's authority. There is no national coordination. There is no unified response. Each local sheriff, each state police force, each county detective operates in its own silo, And the gang exploits those gaps with professional precision. The money they take is significant, but the thing they take from their next target is more valuable than money. In January of 1934, the gang breaks into the police arsenal at Peru, Indiana. They walk out with rifles, machine guns, bulletproof vests, and ammunition. They are now, in terms of raw firepower, better equipped than most of the police forces chasing them. It is a statement as much as a heist. A declaration that they are not running scared, that they are not hiding. They are operating. They are professionals, and they want everyone to know it. Dillinger, through all of this, is developing into something more than a bank robber. He is becoming a performer. He understands instinctively that the press is a tool, and he uses it. When reporters manage to get near him, he talks to them, charming, quotable, always with that easy smile. He seems to enjoy the attention without being drunk on it, which makes him more dangerous, not less. A man who needs the spotlight makes mistakes chasing it. Dillinger courts the spotlight on his own terms, and he is always the one deciding when the interview is over. The public, meanwhile, is genuinely divided about him in a way that disturbs authorities more than the robberies themselves. Letters arrive at newspapers praising him. A poll conducted in Indiana finds that a significant portion of respondents consider Dillinger a kind of folk hero. He has reportedly said more than once that he only robs banks, and banks, as far as a Depression-era working family is concerned, have been robbing them for years. It is a simple message, and it lands. J. Edgar Hoover is watching all of this, and he is not amused. Hoover has been director of what will become the Federal Bureau of Investigation since 1924. He is, by 1933, already one of the most powerful men in Washington. Careful, meticulous, obsessed with the image of his agency and his own place in it. He has spent years building the FBI into a professional, centralized force at a time when American law enforcement is fragmented and often corrupt. And now John Dillinger is making his agency look slow, clumsy, and irrelevant. The issue is partly legal. Federal jurisdiction over bank robbery is limited in this period. The laws simply have not caught up with the reality of interstate criminal operations. Hoover is pushing Congress to expand federal authority, using Dillinger as his primary exhibit. But politics moves slowly, and Dillinger moves fast. So in the interim, Hoover does what he does best. He controls the narrative. He is the one who will later popularize the term public enemy number one. He understands, with a publicist's instinct, that naming the enemy clearly and dramatically is itself a weapon. It tells the public who to fear. It tells his own agents who to focus on. And it tells John Dillinger that he is now the official target of the full weight of the federal government. Dillinger reads the newspapers. He knows exactly what Hoover is doing. And from all available evidence, he does not seem particularly troubled by it. By January of 1934, the gang is operating out of Tucson, Arizona, lying low after a relentless autumn of bank jobs. They have money, weapons, and a network of contacts that stretches across the Midwest. They have, by any reasonable measure, been winning. And then a fire in a hotel changes everything. A fire breaks out at the Congress Hotel in Tucson on the 23rd of January, 1934. Two members of the gang, Pierpont and Makeley, are staying there. When firefighters help carry luggage out of the burning building, they notice the bags are extraordinarily heavy. One curious firefighter later describes the contents to police. A local officer doing routine follow-up recognizes the names of the guests from a crime circular. Within days, the Tucson police quietly and efficiently arrest the entire gang: Dillinger, Pierpont, Makeley, Van Meter, and others, without a single shot fired. It is, in its way, the most embarrassing arrest of Dillinger's career. Not taken down in a blazing confrontation, not outsmarted by a federal superagent, caught because of a hotel fire and a heavy suitcase. He is extradited to Indiana to face charges for the murder of an East Chicago police officer named William Patrick O'Malley, who was shot and killed during the first national bank robbery in January. The evidence against him is strong. Indiana wants him badly. He is transported to the Crown Point Jail in Lake County, Indiana, a facility that the local sheriff, Lillian Hawley, proudly and very publicly describes as escape-proof. She says this to reporters. She poses for photographs with Dillinger at the jail, the two of them grinning at the camera like they are old acquaintances rather than prisoner and warden. Dillinger has his arm around her shoulder. He looks relaxed. He looks like a man who has somewhere to be. He is held at Crown Point through February of 1934. His lawyer, Louis Paquette, works on his defense, and, unknown to the authorities, on something else entirely. Paquette is not merely building a legal strategy. He is arranging an escape, coordinating with contacts outside the jail, and moving money to the right people in the right positions. The escape that is about to happen is not the work of one brilliant man alone. It is the product of corruption, carefully purchased, and of a wooden prop that will become the most famous object in American criminal history. The prop itself is real. A piece of wood, shaped and smoothed into the rough form of a pistol, darkened with black shoe polish until it catches the light convincingly. Whether Dillinger carved it himself or received it from an outside contact remains a matter of debate. What is not a matter of debate is what happens next. On the morning of the 3rd of March, 1934, Dillinger produces the wooden gun, presses it against a guard's ribs, and takes his keys. He moves through the jail with the particular calm of a man who has rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times. He locks guards and staff in their own cells as he goes. He picks up 2 actual firearms left unattended inside the facility. He walks through the front of Crown Point, crosses the prison yard, and gets into Sheriff Hawley's own car. He drives out of Indiana, heading north toward Chicago, a free man, armed with a piece of wood and an absolute refusal to accept the life that had been assigned to him. The escape makes him famous in a way that even his bank jobs had not. There is something about it, the audacity, the sheer theatrical nerve, that captures the national imagination completely. He walked out of an escape-proof jail. He stole the sheriff's car. The story reads like something from a movie serial, and the country cannot get enough of it. Newspapers run it on their front pages for days. Sheriff Hawley, who posed for that photograph with her arm around the prisoner, is humiliated on a national scale. But the escape also triggers a significant legal development. In driving a stolen car across the state line from Indiana into Illinois, Dillinger violates the Dyer Act, a federal law against interstate transport of stolen vehicles. For the first time, federal agents have clear, unambiguous jurisdiction to pursue him. Hoover immediately assigns his best men to the case. The manhunt enters a new phase. Dillinger surfaces in St. Paul, Minnesota, in March of 1934, reuniting with Homer Van Meter and beginning to rebuild his operation. He has lost Pierpont and Mackley, still sitting in Ohio on murder charges. But there are always new men available for work of this kind, and Dillinger moves quickly to assemble a new crew. He also moves quickly because he is beginning to understand that the geography of his freedom is shrinking. The FBI is not the only agency hunting him now. Local police forces, state agencies, and private investigators are all motivated by the reward money accumulating around his name. Every city is hotter than the last. Every safe house has a shorter shelf life. And unlike the early days, when he could move through the Midwest with near invisibility, he is now the most recognizable face in America. In late March, federal agents close in on his apartment in St. Paul. There is a gunfight in the stairwell. Dillinger is hit in the leg, his first serious wound, and escapes through a back exit with Billy Frechette, the woman who became his companion and remained fiercely loyal to him until the very end. They drive south through the night, bleeding and hunted, and disappear again into the Midwest landscape. The wound is serious enough to require medical attention he cannot get at a hospital. He reaches out through criminal networks to find a doctor willing to treat a man whose face is on every front page in the country. It takes time, costs money, and costs him something more important: days of stillness when he cannot afford to be still. The FBI is getting closer. The net is tightening. And John Dillinger, for the first time since walking out of Crown Point, is beginning to feel the weight of it. April of 1934. A small resort town called Mercer, Wisconsin. The trees are still bare, the lake is gray and cold, and the roads through the northern woods are mostly empty at this time of year. It is exactly the kind of place where a man who needs to disappear can disappear. The Little Bohemia Lodge sits on the edge of Little Star Lake, a two-story wooden building run by a man named Emil Wanatka and his wife Nan. It is a quiet place, a seasonal resort, not the kind of establishment that expects much drama. When a group of men arrive on the 20th of April asking to rent the lodge for a few days, Wanatka accepts without much thought. The men are polite. They pay in cash. They keep to themselves. They are John Dillinger, Homer Van Meter, John Hamilton, Tommy Carroll, and Lester Gillis. A man known to history by his nickname, Babyface Nelson. With them are several women. Billie Frechette is not among them. She has already been arrested by federal agents in Chicago just days earlier, taken in a coffee shop ambush that Dillinger narrowly avoids by not being present. Her arrest shakes him. She is charged with harboring a federal fugitive and sentenced to 2 years. He cannot help her. He cannot go back for her. He can only keep moving. At Little Bohemia, the group tries to rest. But Nan Wanatka is paying attention. She notices the guns. She notices the way the men position themselves with their backs to walls and their eyes toward doors. She notices things that a woman running a quiet lakeside lodge should not have to notice. She gets a message out to federal authorities. Melvin Purvis, the FBI's special agent in charge of the Chicago office, receives the tip and moves immediately. Hoover authorizes the operation. Agents are flown in from Chicago and St. Paul, driving the final miles to the lodge in cars with their headlights off, moving through the Wisconsin woods in the dark of an April night. What happens next is one of the most embarrassing operational failures in the history of American law enforcement. The agents approach the lodge just as 3 men are leaving. Civilians, Civilian Conservation Corps workers who have simply been having dinner at the bar. The agents, strung tight with adrenaline and operating in near-total darkness, call out for the men to halt. The men, confused and frightened, run for their car. The agents open fire. 2 of the 3 civilians are wounded. 1, a man named Eugene Boineau, is killed. He is a lodge customer who happened to be in the wrong place at the worst possible moment, and he dies for it. The gunfire alerts everyone inside. Dillinger, Van Meter, and Hamilton go out through the back windows and into the Wisconsin woods before the agents have time to surround the building properly. Babyface Nelson, moving in a different direction, encounters a group of agents on a nearby road and opens fire, killing FBI agent W. Carter Baum and wounding 2 others before vanishing into the trees. When the shooting stops and the agents finally enter the lodge, they find the women, the companions who stayed behind, sitting inside, unharmed and unimpressed. The gang is gone. An innocent man is dead. An FBI agent is dead. And John Dillinger is once again moving through the darkness of Middle America, wounded, exhausted, and free. The Little Bohemia debacle lands in the newspapers like a grenade. The coverage is savage. Hoover's agents have managed to kill a civilian and one of their own, wound 2 more innocent bystanders, and let the entire gang walk out the back of a wooden lodge in the Wisconsin woods. Editorial writers across the country ask the obvious question: is the FBI actually capable of catching anyone? Hoover is incandescent with fury. He does not fire Purvis, not yet, but their relationship, already complicated by the fact that Purvis is genuinely popular with the press in a way that Hoover finds threatening, begins its final deterioration at Little Bohemia. Hoover doubles down publicly, makes statements about the gang more aggressive and absolute than anything he has said before. He needs a result. He needs it soon. Dillinger surfaces briefly in May, long enough for a doctor named Lozer, operating under significant pressure and for significant payment, to perform crude plastic surgery on his face. The procedure is meant to alter his features enough to defeat recognition. His fingerprints are also treated with acid, an agonizing process that partially obscures them but does not eliminate them. Neither procedure is particularly successful. His face is slightly altered, but still fundamentally his face. Anyone who has studied his photographs closely enough, and by now millions of Americans have, can still recognize him. He also obtains new identity documents, carefully constructed fakes that give him a new name and a new history. He moves into Chicago, renting a room in a boarding house run by a Romanian immigrant woman named Anna Cumpănaș, known to her neighbors as Anna Sage. She is a friend of a woman Dillinger has been seeing, a woman named Polly Hamilton. The arrangement is quiet and domestic in a way that seems almost impossible given the context. A boarding house, a landlady, a girlfriend. Clean sheets and a kitchen table. He is still John Dillinger. The FBI still wants him more than they have ever wanted anyone. Through June and into July of 1934, he lies low with a discipline that suggests he understands how thin the remaining ice is beneath him. The new crew he has been running with is fragmented. Hamilton has been shot and died of his wounds after Little Bohemia. Carroll has been killed by police in Iowa. Nelson is operating independently and with a recklessness that Dillinger keeps his distance from. The gang, as it existed in its peak form through the winter and spring, is effectively finished. But Dillinger is not finished. He is thinking. He is always thinking. Then Anna Sage makes a decision that will change everything. Anna Sage is in trouble of a different kind. She has been in the United States for years, running establishments that police have classified as disorderly houses. She faces deportation back to Romania, a prospect that terrifies her. She approaches the East Chicago Police Department through an intermediary and offers them something in exchange for help with her immigration status. She offers them John Dillinger. The East Chicago Police contact the FBI. Melvin Purvis is brought in. Arrangements are made. Anna Sage will inform agents of Dillinger's movements. Specifically, she will tell them in advance the next time she accompanies him to a public place. In exchange, she is promised consideration regarding her deportation case. The promise, as it turns out, is not worth much. But she does not know that yet. On the evening of the 22nd of July, 1934, Anna Sage makes the call. She tells her contact that she, Dillinger, and Polly Hamilton will be going to the movies that night. She will wear an orange skirt so that agents can identify her in the crowd. The skirt, under the particular quality of light that Chicago summer nights cast on city streets, reads closer to red. She becomes known to history as the Woman in Red, though the color she was actually wearing was orange. Melvin Purvis assembles his team. Roughly 20 agents and police officers are positioned around the Biograph Theater on North Lincoln Avenue. Some are inside, some are across the street, some are stationed at the exits. Purvis himself stands near the front entrance, a cigar in hand, which he will light to signal the agents the moment the target walks out. Inside the theater, John Dillinger watches a film called Manhattan Melodrama. Clark Gable plays a criminal who ends up in the electric chair. Whatever Dillinger thinks about that particular piece of cinema on that particular night, he keeps it to himself. The film ends just after 10:30 in the evening. The three of them, Dillinger, Polly Hamilton, and Anna Sage, walk out of the Biograph into the warm July night. The street is busy, full of people who have no idea what is about to happen. Purvis lights his cigar. Agents begin to move. Dillinger sees them. Something shifts in him in those final seconds, some animal alertness that has kept him alive through 2 years of the most intensive manhunt in American history, fires one last time. He reaches for his pocket. He turns toward the alley beside the theater. The agents open fire. He is hit 3 times. 2 bullets enter from the back. 1 exits through his right eye. John Dillinger falls on the pavement of the alley beside the Biograph Theater and does not get up. He is 31 years old. The crowd that gathers in the minutes after the shooting is enormous. Word travels fast on a Chicago summer night. People push forward against the police cordon, and then, in a detail that is almost impossible to believe but is documented by multiple witnesses, people begin dipping handkerchiefs and programs and scraps of paper into the blood on the pavement. Souvenirs, mementos of the moment. America has been watching this man for 2 years, has followed him across the front pages of 100 newspapers, has argued about him at kitchen tables and factory floors and barber shops. And now, here is the end of the story, warm and immediate and real, right here on a Chicago alley. His body is taken to the Cook County morgue. The crowds that line up outside hoping to see him, to confirm for themselves that it is truly over, are so large that police have difficulty managing them. Thousands of people pass through over the following days. John Dillinger is buried in Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis, not far from the city where it all began. His father, John Wilson Dillinger, survives him. Billie Frechette, the woman who stayed with him through the worst of it, serves her 2 years and walks out into a world where his name is already becoming legend. The newspapers call it the end of an era. They are not wrong. In the weeks after John Dillinger died on that Chicago pavement, something interesting happened. The news of his death should have closed the story. The FBI had its man. Hoover had his victory. The most wanted criminal in America was gone, and the nation could move on to the next headline, the next crisis, the next chapter of the Depression's long misery. Instead, the story got bigger. Letters poured into newspapers from readers who were not relieved by Dillinger's death, but saddened by it. Not because they approved of bank robbery or celebrated violence. Most of them were careful to say that. But because something in his story had spoken to them in a way they found difficult to articulate and impossible to simply set aside. He had moved through a broken America with speed and nerve, and a kind of defiant energy that the breadlines and the foreclosure notices and the grinding gray weight of the Depression had stolen from ordinary life. He had not fixed anything. He had not helped anyone in any meaningful, lasting way. But he had been free in a country where freedom felt, for millions of people, like something that had been quietly taken from them without their consent. That is a powerful thing to be, and it does not die with the man. Hoover moved quickly to control the narrative in the aftermath. He was a meticulous manager of public perception, and he understood that an outlaw who becomes a folk hero is an outlaw who has won something even in defeat. His agency released statements emphasizing Dillinger's violence, his murders, his willingness to sacrifice anyone around him to preserve his own freedom. The murder of Jess Sarber in Lima, Ohio, the death of Officer O'Malley in East Chicago, the killing of FBI agent W. Carter Baum in the Wisconsin woods after Little Bohemia. These were real. These men had families. Their deaths were not romantic and not abstract. And Hoover wanted that truth in the public record alongside the wooden gun and the stolen sheriff's car. He was right to try, but he was fighting against something older and more stubborn than facts. The mythology of the noble outlaw is as old as human storytelling. Robin Hood, Jesse James, Billy the Kid. Every culture in every era produces these figures. Men who operate outside the law in ways that ordinary people, constrained by ordinary life, find secretly or not so secretly thrilling. The specific details shift with the era. The emotional architecture is always the same. A man who will not be contained. A system that fails its people. A chase that ends badly but is remembered forever. Dillinger fit this template almost perfectly. And he fitted at precisely the moment when American faith in its institutions, in banks, in government, in the fundamental promise that hard work would be rewarded, had collapsed more completely than at any point in the nation's history. His timing was, in the darkest possible sense, impeccable. But there is another side to this story, and it demands to be told honestly. The real Dillinger, as opposed to the mythological one, was not particularly careful about who got hurt. The bank jobs were not bloodless. Officer O'Malley was shot and killed during the East Chicago robbery. Whether Dillinger himself pulled the trigger or whether it was another member of his crew has never been conclusively resolved. But he was there, he was in command, and the man is dead either way. Jess Sarber was killed by Pierpont during the Lima jailbreak in a rescue operation that Dillinger organized and funded. Agent Baum was killed by Babyface Nelson at Little Bohemia in a disaster that Dillinger's presence at the lodge directly caused. And Babyface Nelson himself, Lester Gillis, who ran with the gang through those final frantic months, was by any measure a genuinely dangerous and indiscriminate killer. A man who killed for reasons that had nothing to do with any code of honor and everything to do with a hair-trigger temperament that frightened even the other criminals around him. Dillinger chose to work with him. That choice had consequences. The Crown Point escape, which more than anything else defines how Dillinger is remembered, is also more complicated than the legend suggests. He did not walk out of that jail through sheer individual brilliance alone. Money had changed hands. His lawyer, Louis Paquette, had coordinated with contacts inside the facility, and there is strong evidence that corrupt personnel were financially persuaded to look in the wrong direction at the right moment. The wooden prop was real. The audacity of the bluff was real. But the image of one man outwitting an entire institution on nerve alone is a simplified version of a messier, more corrupt, more human truth. None of this erases what he was. It just makes him what all genuinely interesting historical figures are: complicated. Hoover, for his part, used Dillinger's death as a launching pad. The FBI's handling of the case, despite its catastrophic failures at Little Bohemia and elsewhere, was ultimately framed as a triumph of federal law enforcement over interstate crime. The legal changes Hoover had been pushing for, expanded federal jurisdiction over bank robbery, over flight across state lines, over the harboring of fugitives, were passed in the summer of 1934, some of them literally while Dillinger was still alive and moving. His existence had made the argument for a stronger, more centralized FBI more compellingly than any politician could have managed. In a very real sense, John Dillinger helped build the modern FBI, not intentionally, not as any kind of legacy he would have chosen. But his crimes were the specific pressure that forced the legislative and institutional changes that transformed Hoover's agency from a relatively modest federal investigative body into the powerful, centralized force it became. Hoover understood this. He spent the rest of his career, decades, making sure that Dillinger's name remained associated with the FBI's origin story, with its founding mythology of order overcoming chaos. Anna Sage did not get what she was promised. Despite her cooperation in setting up the ambush outside the Biograph Theater, the Immigration and Naturalization Service deported her to Romania in April of 1936. She had delivered America's most wanted man and received in return the very thing she had been most afraid of. She died in Romania in 1947, having spent the last decade of her life in a country she had left and never wanted to return to. Melvin Purvis resigned from the FBI in 1935. His relationship with Hoover had become untenable. The director could not forgive the public affection that reporters and readers directed toward his Chicago agent, and had systematically made Purvis's professional life miserable in the months following the shooting. Purvis tried several civilian careers, struggled, and died in 1960 from a gunshot wound. He was 56 years old. The official ruling was suicide, though members of his own family never fully accepted that conclusion. Hoover outlasted them all. He ran the FBI until his death in 1972, 38 years after the night outside the Biograph, consolidating power in ways that would eventually become their own scandal. The file he built on Dillinger was one of the first great FBI case files, exhaustive and obsessive, the template for how the Bureau would pursue major criminal targets for generations to come. In Hollywood, the Dillinger story proved irresistible from almost the moment the body was cold. Films appeared within months of his death, a fact that tells you everything about how completely he had captured the national imagination. Over the following decades, he was played by Lawrence Tierney in 1945, by Mark Harmon in 1979, by Johnny Depp in 2009. Each version of the story reflects the era that produced it more than it reflects the actual man. Sometimes a romantic rebel, sometimes a tragic victim of circumstance, sometimes a portrait of toxic charisma. The real Dillinger recedes a little further with each retelling, replaced by a figure who is more convenient, more cinematic, more usable. The wooden gun, or what has been claimed to be it, sits today in the FBI's own museum in Washington. Hoover kept it, his greatest enemy's most famous prop, preserved and displayed in the house that enemy helped to build. It is either deeply ironic or perfectly logical, depending on how you choose to look at it. What do we do, finally, with John Dillinger? He was not a good man in any straightforward sense. He killed, or caused to be killed, people who deserved to go home to their families. He used people as cover and convenience. He was capable of genuine warmth and genuine ruthlessness, sometimes in the same afternoon. He was brilliant at a very specific and very limited set of skills, and he burned through that brilliance in a single incandescent year that ended on a hot pavement in Chicago before he had reached his 32nd birthday. But he was also a product of something real. He came out of a broken America, broken by poverty, by a legal system that punished harshly and rewarded inconsistently, by a prison environment that was more criminal finishing school than rehabilitation. He entered the system young and emerged from it transformed in the specific direction the system seemed almost designed to produce. His story is a personal story and a structural story simultaneously, and neither reading fully cancels the other. America in 1934 needed a villain. But it needed something else too, something harder to name, something that sat in the uncomfortable space between condemnation and longing. Dillinger provided both. He was the thing you were supposed to fear and the thing you secretly understood, and that combination is what made him not just a criminal, but a mirror. When people lined up outside the Cook County morgue in the July heat to see his body, they were not celebrating violence. They were not endorsing bank robbery. They were doing something more complicated and more human than that. They were saying goodbye to a story that had given them, for one strange and violent year in the worst decade of their lives, something that felt, however briefly, however wrongly, like possibility. That is what America gave John Dillinger, and in his own broken, brilliant, catastrophic way, it is what he gave back.